St. Ambrose is defined by three kind of pillars of being Catholic, classical, and close-knit. So we pride ourselves on these three things. We think that these make us who we are. They make us who we are. They make us a great school. And we find that people usually know what we mean when we say we're a Catholic school, and they usually know what we mean when we say we have a close-knit community. But it's the blank stares are a little, they come up a little more often when we say we're a classical school. What does that mean exactly to be classical? So it's worth starting there to let you get to know us a little bit more. So when I try to talk about classical education in just 5 minutes or so, I like to try to summarize it under three heads, which are the what, the why, and the how. So what do we do, why do we do it, and how do we do it? But I like to start with why, because the purpose, the goal, shapes everything else that we do. So why do we do what we do? What is the goal of a classical education? And the biggest thing to take away here is that unlike a lot of modern education, classical education is not, it's not job training. It's not future-oriented, really. I mean, it is future-oriented in a particular way, but rather than focused on an external future end result, like being able to get a good job someday, which we, of course, hope all of the kids do, it's focused much more immediately on the internal good of the students on a day-to-day basis. So if you ask a student, well, if you tell a student, do your homework, and they say, why? It's really easy and tempting to say something like, so that you can get a good grade, so that you can pass the class, so that you can get into a good college, so that you can get a good job, so that you can make a lot of money. It's easy to think of education along that train of thought. That's a utilitarian goal, and it's a future and external goal. Those are all good things. They're just not the primary thing. So when we say to a student, do your homework, and they say why, the answer around here is because it's good for you. You probably say that to your kids sometimes too, because it's good for you. But that really is the truth. It's good for them, even in the here and now. It's good for them to wrestle intellectually with difficult problems because they're growing in their problem-solving skills. They're growing in their intellectual capacity on a daily basis. So the goal of a classical education is the formation of the human person. God made us in his image and likeness. That means we have various spiritual powers and capacities. We have an intellect, a free will, memory, imagination. We're trying to develop and form those things in the students on a daily basis. Intellectually, of course, there's a lot of learning and teaching that goes around here, but just as importantly, the moral formation, trying to cultivate them in the development of the virtues, to grow in virtue, to grow in the spiritual life through the prayer and sacraments. Then moving from the why to the what do we do? What do we do that makes us classical? If you think just in terms of like the classes that they're going to take, what's a little bit different around here? A big part of that difference is the trivium, the three ways of grammar, logic, and rhetoric. These are the first three of the classical 7 liberal arts going all the way back to Greece and Rome. And those first three, grammar, logic, and rhetoric, are the fundamental subjects of human knowledge. They're very closely intertwined with language. So grammar, obviously, is the study of language. Logic is the study of reason, of rational discourse, how you kind of move from one truth to another. And rhetoric is the ability to express yourself elegantly, persuasively, even beautifully, perhaps. All of those are fundamentally tied up with language. Language is fundamentally tied up with thought, right? If you ever think about thinking, and if you do, you're a philosopher, but if you think about thinking, you'll realize that your thinking is even in language, right? You use words to think. So the ability to think clearly is really closely tied to the ability to speak clearly and to write clearly and to reason clearly. So by working with the students very intentionally on their language skills in this particular classical way of grammar, logic, and rhetoric, we have the best access to actually developing their thinking skills. These are tools, grammar, logic, and rhetoric. They're tools that equip students to learn any other subject. So we teach them in their own right. They'll have a grammar class, a rhetoric class, a logic class. But then these are also the tools and skills that they use in all of their other classes. And by perfecting, developing those abilities, the students are able to then be competent self-learners. I mean, no subject will be out of their reach. It doesn't matter what subject they decide to major in college, what field of work they go into. These skills pay off across the board because they're the development of the fundamental human power of rationality. And that's what makes you successful in any walk of life. Okay, and then how do we do it? I'll just touch on 3 things, although there's probably a couple of dozen that we could discuss. But three of the big pieces, so to speak, of how we do this in our classrooms. One is a use of primary sources, a heavy use of primary sources as opposed to textbooks. That doesn't mean we don't have any textbooks. Math and science especially will still have textbooks. History uses textbooks, but in a secondary way where the main study, the primary engagement is with the primary sources. Why is that important? It's because what we're trying to do is not just fill the students' minds with information, we're trying to teach them how to think. What textbooks do is present you the distillation of somebody else's thinking. We want them to engage directly with the primary material so that they can learn how to think for themselves. Very much related to that, our mode of instruction in the classroom is much more discussion-based as opposed to lecture-based. So we do certainly lecture. There are times when we have to just explain something to students. But we lean heavily into Socratic dialogue and discussion modes of classroom presentation. This is for the same reason, because just like we don't want students to simply rely on a textbook for information, we also don't want them to simply rely on a teacher for information. By discussing the ideas and coming to solutions and understanding of truth together, we walk with students on that path of discovery rather than just kind of presenting them with a fact that they could look up on Wikipedia. And then the third thing I'll touch on is the Latin language. One of the key ways that we accomplish these goals is by teaching them Latin. One of the most common questions that we get is, why learn Latin? Nobody speaks it, it's a dead language, it has no use. And that's exactly the point, because we're not prioritizing the things that are immediately useful in a practical field. We're prioritizing the internal formation of the mind. And Latin just happens to be exceptionally good at that. So we can get the Latin scholars up here if you want the details, but it's an incredibly organized language. The Roman Empire is famous in world history for its incredible system of organization, so much of which is still with us today. The language was no exception to that. Their Latin language is exceptionally organized. So English is a little bit of a sloppy language. Latin is not. It's rigorously organized. And so by studying Latin, students are able to learn how language works in a clearer and easier way. Not that it's easy. They will complain about it. It is difficult. But it teaches them the organization of language better than any other language does. And then as a bonus, if you do well, you get to read classical works of literature like the Aeneid in the original language, and that's just cool. So one of the handouts is kind of a summary of several reasons why we study Latin, but I'm not going to read all the way through it with you. I think I'll conclude there and just look forward to more one-on-one conversations to discuss these things further.